March 26, 1945. 12th Army Group Headquarters, Bad Nauheim, Germany. General Omar Bradley stood with a telephone pressed to his ear, listening patiently as Dwight D. Eisenhower explained fuel allocations, gasoline, ammunition depots, truck priorities, the dull, grinding mathematics of logistics, the unglamorous machinery that actually decided wars. Bradley agreed, responded when necessary, and stared absently at the wall-sized map of Germany, thick with pins and arrows. Then the door opened. Bradley noticed it only because his operations officer did not knock. The man stepped inside, rigid, his face drained of color, not anxious, not hurried, white, as if all the blood had been pulled out of him at once. Bradley raised one finger without looking away from the map. Wait. Eisenhower continued talking about tonnage ratios. The operations officer ignored the signal. "Sir," he said, voice tight, "we have a situation with Third Army." Bradley covered the mouthpiece with his hand. "Not now. It's urgent." "How urgent?" The officer swallowed. "General Patton, sir." Bradley closed his eyes. Of course it was. "Ike, I need to call you back," Bradley said, and hung up before Eisenhower could reply. He turned slowly. What did George do now? The operations officer placed a radio message on the desk. "Third Army reports their forward elements have reached Aschaffenburg." Bradley stared at the paper. Then he stood, walked to the map, and placed his finger on Frankfurt. "They were here yesterday," he said quietly. His finger moved east. Aschaffenburg, 60 miles. "When did this message arrive?" 15 minutes ago, sir. Time stamped early this morning." Bradley did the math in his head. Frankfurt last night, Aschaffenburg by dawn. 60 miles, he said. "Yes, sir." "In one night." "Yes, sir." Bradley sat down very carefully. "That's impossible." "Apparently not, sir." For a long moment, no one spoke. On the map, Third Army was now a blue arrow stabbing deep into Germany, far ahead of every neighboring formation. 60 miles ahead of First Army, 80 miles ahead of Ninth Army. A lone spear thrust far beyond its supports. "Where are their flanks?" Bradley asked. The operations officer hesitated. "Exposed, sir?" "How exposed?" "Completely exposed, sir. They're in a salient. One German counterattack could cut them off entirely." Bradley pinched the bridge of his nose. "Get me Patton." "We're trying, sir." "Trying?" "Third Army communications are stretched." "Stretched?" "They've advanced so fast their radios can't maintain reliable contact with headquarters. We're relaying through intermediaries." Bradley laughed softly. It was not a happy sound. "Of course they are. George is moving faster than radio waves." 20 minutes later, the phone rang. Bradley snatched it up. "George." "Brad!" Patton's voice was cheerful, almost relaxed. "Did you get my position report?" "I got it," Bradley said. "You're in Aschaffenburg." "That's right." "You were in Frankfurt yesterday." "Correct." Bradley took a breath. "George, that's 60 miles. 63, Patton replied. "I measured it." "You can't advance 60 miles in one day." "Why not?" "Why not?" Bradley snapped. "Because there are German divisions between Frankfurt and Aschaffenburg." "Where?" Patton corrected. "Past tense. They retreated. I pursued. Now I'm here, and they're somewhere else, probably running toward Berlin." Bradley felt a headache forming behind his eyes. "George, doctrine says after a breakthrough you consolidate before advancing." "Doctrine also said the Rhine was impregnable," Patton replied. "I crossed it with some boats and a band of angry Missourians. Maybe doctrine isn't always right." "George!" "Brad, listen to me," Patton said, and the cheer faded from his voice. "The Germans are beaten, not tactically, psychologically. If I stop now, I give them time to recover. If I keep moving, they collapse completely." Bradley was silent because the terrible thing was Patton might be right. "Where are you going next?" he asked. "Würzburg, then Nuremberg. Then we'll see. Maybe Prague, maybe Austria, wherever Germans need killing." "I can't authorize that." "Then don't," Patton said lightly. "Just don't order me to stop. I'll take silence as permission. That's not how command works." "Brad," Patton said quietly, "you're my friend. You've covered for me before. I'm asking you now. Let me finish this." "By giving me a heart attack?" Patton laughed. "You'll survive." The line went dead. Bradley stared at the phone. "He hung up on me," he said. His operations officer cleared his throat. "Sir, what should I tell the staff?" Bradley replaced the receiver slowly. "Tell them Third Army is advancing," he said. "Exact positions unknown. Expected rate of advance impossible." March 27, 1945. Bradley's intelligence section descended into chaos. "Sir," an analyst said, "we have 3 position reports for Third Army. They conflict." Bradley looked down at the papers. One placed Third Army at Würzburg. Another had them approaching Schweinfurt. A third claimed sightings near Bamberg. "Which is correct?" Bradley asked. "All of them, sir." "Explain." "Third Army is advancing on multiple axes. Different divisions are in different locations. They're spread across 80 miles. Bradley walked to the map. Blue pins dotted Bavaria in no discernible pattern. It looked like someone had fired a shotgun at Germany. "This is a nightmare," he said. "Yes, sir." "There's more," the analyst added. "Position reports are arriving 6 to 12 hours late." "How far do they move in that time?" 20 to 30 miles, sir." Bradley realized something then, and it chilled him. Third Army was advancing faster than intelligence could track. He was commanding an army he could not locate. "Get me Eisenhower," he said. When the call connected, Eisenhower's voice was tight. "Brad, where is Third Army?" "That's an excellent question, sir." "That's not an answer. Our last confirmed report puts them near Würzburg 8 hours ago. They could be anywhere within 50 miles now." Silence. "You don't know where your own army is," Eisenhower said. "They're moving faster than we can track." "Brad," Eisenhower said slowly, "the Russians are advancing from the east. There are demarcation lines." "I understand, sir." "Do you?" Eisenhower replied. "Because it sounds like you have an army operating independently." Bradley had no answer. After the call, he stared again at the map, at the impossible arrow driving eastward. Somewhere out there, George Patton was moving, and no one could stop him. March 28, 1945. By now the problem was no longer how fast Third Army was advancing. The problem was that no one knew where its commander was. Position reports continued to arrive from Third Army units with mechanical regularity. Divisions advancing. Towns taken. Bridges seized intact. German resistance collapsing or evaporating entirely. Everything functioned, except the one thing that should have anchored it all. George S. Patton had disappeared. Bradley read the reports in silence, his jaw set. Armor columns were moving east at a pace that defied planning tables. Infantry units were leapfrogging objectives without waiting for consolidation. Supply officers were improvising fuel dumps on the fly, commandeering German depots, siphoning gasoline from abandoned vehicles, stealing momentum wherever they found it. And somewhere inside this chaos, the army functioned perfectly. Patton, however, was nowhere to be found. "Sir," Bradley's aide said carefully, "we've received additional sightings." "Go on." A reconnaissance pilot reported seeing a jeep matching General Patton's description near Bamberg. "How long ago?" "Yesterday afternoon." Bradley nodded slowly. "There's more. An MP checkpoint logged a 3-star general passing through toward Nuremberg late last night." Bradley leaned back in his chair. "So," he said, "it's possible my army commander is operating ahead of his own headquarters." "Yes, sir." How far ahead? The aide hesitated. Possibly 200 miles, sir. Bradley considered that. With any other commander, the answer would have been simple. Impossible. With Patton, it felt inevitable. Should we send someone to locate him? The aide asked. Bradley shook his head. If George wanted to be found, he would be. At Third Army headquarters, the situation was scarcely better. Bradley finally reached General Hobart Gay, Patton's chief of staff. "Gay," Bradley said, "where is Third Army?" "Elements are approaching Würzburg," Gay replied. "Others are pushing toward Bayreuth. Southern units are securing near Schweinfurt." Bradley marked the map. The points formed a wide triangle, stretching across 80 miles of enemy territory. "Where is Patton?" There was a pause. "We're not entirely sure, sir." Bradley closed his eyes. "You don't know where your commanding general is?" "Sir," Gay said carefully, "General Patton is conducting forward reconnaissance." "For 3 days?" "Yes, sir." "When did he last check in?" "This morning. He was in Aschaffenburg." "That was 8 hours ago." "Yes, sir." Bradley hung up and turned to his operations officer. "Start a list," he said. "Sir." "Things General Patton has done that should be impossible." The officer picked up a pen. "Number 1, Bradley said, advanced 60 miles in a day." The pen scratched. "Number 2, Bradley continued, became impossible to locate." The officer looked up. "Sir, how long should the list be?" Bradley stared at the map. Leave space. March 29, 1945. Third Army reached Nuremberg, the symbolic heart of Nazi Germany, the city of rallies and banners, Hitler's ceremonial capital, and Patton's tanks were at its gates. Bradley learned of it from an intelligence runner who burst into his office, breathless. "Sir, Third Army reports contact at Nuremberg." Bradley stood up so fast his chair fell backward. "Nuremberg?" he said. "Yes, sir." "How far did they move?" 60 miles in 36 hours. Bradley reached for the phone. "Ike," he said when Eisenhower answered. "Third Army has reached Nuremberg." There was a long pause. "I thought they were near Würzburg yesterday," Eisenhower said. "They were. And now?" "They're at Nuremberg." Eisenhower exhaled slowly. "That's insane." "Yes, sir. No army can sustain that pace." "Apparently," Bradley replied, "Third Army can." "And Patton?" Bradley hesitated. "Unknown, sir. You've lost a 3-star general." "It's more accurate to say he refuses to be found." There was a brief silence. Then Eisenhower laughed, a sharp, incredulous sound. "He's ungovernable." "Yes, sir." "Then why haven't you fired him?" Bradley answered without hesitation. "Because he's winning." Another pause. "Brad," Eisenhower said, "tell George to slow down. The Soviets are closing from the east." "I'll try." "That's not a yes. It's the best I can offer." The assault on Nuremberg unfolded with brutal efficiency. German resistance, expected to be fierce, collapsed under the weight of Third Army's momentum. Units surrendered en masse. Defensive positions dissolved before they could be fully occupied. Patton's divisions attacked relentlessly, bypassing pockets of resistance and leaving follow-on units to mop them up. The city fell faster than anyone predicted. And still, Patton was nowhere. Reports trickled in like rumors. A jeep tearing through a crossroads under artillery fire. A general standing in a ruined town square, directing traffic with a riding crop. A lone officer eating cold rations beside a burning fuel dump, laughing as shells landed nearby. None confirmed. All plausible. Bradley began to suspect something unsettling. Third Army no longer required direct control. It was operating on Patton's intent alone. March 30th, 1945. Bradley sat in his office late at night studying the map. Blue arrows crisscrossed southern Germany, overlapping and diverging in ways that defied standard operational planning. Third Army had advanced nearly 200 miles in 8 days. Supply lines were dangerously stretched. Communications lagged. Intelligence reports arrived obsolete, and yet casualties were low. Resistance was crumbling. German units were fleeing faster than Allied armor could pursue. Bradley realized the truth with reluctant clarity. Patton was right. The Germans were finished. But that did not make the situation any less terrifying. An army advancing this fast could outrun its own support. A single organized counterattack could still cut them off. Worse, uncontrolled movement east risked collision with Soviet forces, an incident that could reshape the entire post-war world. Bradley leaned back and rubbed his eyes. Commanding Patton was not leadership. It was damage control. Late that night, Bradley received another report. "Sir," the aide said, "we believe General Patton was sighted near Bayreuth." "Confirmed?" "No, sir." Bradley nodded slowly. "Of course not." He looked again at the map, at the scattered pins and impossible distances. Somewhere beyond the limits of command, George Patton was still moving, untracked, unchecked, unstoppable. Bradley exhaled and muttered the question that had become his constant companion. "He's where?" April 1st, 1945. Patton finally returned to Third Army headquarters as if nothing unusual had happened. Bradley had been waiting, so had a direct phone line to Eisenhower. Patton entered the room in his polished helmet and riding boots, dust still clinging to the cuffs of his trousers. He looked rested, energized, infuriatingly pleased with himself. "George," Bradley said flatly, "sit down." Patton grinned. "You look tired, Brad." "I've spent 4 days trying to find you." "I wasn't lost," Patton replied. "I knew exactly where I was." "Nobody else did." Patton shrugged. "I was scouting. Someone has to see the ground personally before we move into it. You were 200 miles ahead of your own headquarters." "Technically," Patton said, "they're not behind enemy lines if my army controls them." Bradley closed his eyes and counted to 3. "Eisenhower wants to speak to you." "Of course he does." Bradley handed him the phone. "This is Patton." Eisenhower's voice was cold enough that Bradley could hear it clearly across the room. "George, do you have any idea where you've been for the past 4 days?" "Yes, sir. Reconnoitering routes toward Czechoslovakia without authorization, without coordination, without support." "Sir," Patton replied calmly, "the Germans are beaten. I needed to see how beaten, so I went and looked." "You went behind enemy lines with what security?" "My driver," Patton said, "and my pistols." Bradley winced. "That's all the security I need." Eisenhower exhaled audibly. "George, you cannot drive around Germany like you're on a sightseeing tour." "Why not?" Patton said. "The Germans are running. They're not counterattacking. I've been doing this for 3 years. I know when an enemy is finished." "That's not the point," Eisenhower snapped. "The point is coordination, chain of command." "Sir," Patton replied, "those things slow me down." Silence followed. "The Germans are retreating in chaos," Patton continued. "Every hour I stop to coordinate is an hour they use to reorganize. I'd rather keep the pressure on, even if it means running into Soviet forces." "You'll handle the Soviets?" Eisenhower said incredulously. "If I meet them," Patton said, "I'll handle it." Bradley could feel his pulse in his temples. "George," Eisenhower said finally, "you've advanced 200 miles in 9 days. Your casualties are low. German resistance is collapsing. What exactly are you doing wrong?" Patton didn't answer immediately. Then, quietly, "Nothing, sir." "That's the problem," Eisenhower replied. "You're succeeding while violating every principle of modern command." "Maybe those principles need updating." Eisenhower laughed. It sounded exhausted. "I am not ordering you to stop," he said, "but I am ordering you to file regular position reports. I need to know where you are." "I'll try, sir." "That's not good enough. "It's the best you're getting," Patton said. "If I stop to file paperwork every hour, I stop advancing. You can have coordination or you can have speed. Choose." The line went dead. Patton handed the phone back to Bradley. "He hung up on the Supreme Allied Commander," Bradley said. "He'll get over it," Patton replied. "He always does." Bradley sank into his chair. "George," he said, "you've advanced 200 miles in 9 days. You're approaching Soviet lines without authorization. You've given Ike and me more stress than the rest of this war combined." Patton's grin faded. "But we're winning, Brad." Bradley looked at him for a long moment. "That," he said, "is the only reason you're not fired." "Then I'll keep winning." The advance continued. Through April, Third Army drove east like a force of nature. They crossed rivers before engineers could finish planning bridges. They seized cities ahead of schedule, shattered German formations before they could assemble, and overran territory faster than maps could be printed. Position reports arrived hours late, already obsolete. Supply officers improvised constantly, scavenging fuel and ammunition from captured depots. Communication lines stretched to the breaking point. Divisions operated on intent rather than instruction, and it worked. German resistance collapsed not because it was destroyed, but because it was overwhelmed. Units surrendered without fighting. Commanders abandoned positions rather than face encirclement. Morale disintegrated. Bradley watched it unfold with equal parts awe and terror. Every day the same question echoed through headquarters. "He's where?" It became more than a question. It became a reflex. Third Army would report contact near Regensburg, and by the time Bradley processed it, Patton was already beyond it. Intelligence would place him at one town, only for MPs to spot him 2 valleys away hours later. He was always ahead of expectation, ahead of permission, ahead of control. Bradley stopped trying to track Patton's exact location. It was pointless. Instead, he focused on the only thing that mattered, keeping him pointed east and not too far. By late April, Third Army had advanced nearly 300 miles. They reached the outskirts of Czechoslovakia. They brushed against Soviet demarcation lines. They took objectives weeks ahead of schedule. Patton wanted to go farther. Bradley knew better than to ask how far. Supply lines bent, but did not break. Casualties remained lower than projected. The impossible pace held. And then, suddenly, it was over. May 8, 1945. Germany surrendered. The war in Europe ended not with a final battle, but with exhaustion, an enemy that simply could not keep up. In the aftermath, someone asked Bradley how Third Army had done it so fast. He didn't hesitate. "I kept asking where Patton was," Bradley said, "and every time he was already 50 miles beyond wherever I thought he should be." "And you let him?" Bradley smiled faintly. "I didn't let him. Nobody lets Patton do anything." He paused. "You just hold on," he said, "and try not to die of a heart attack before he wins the war." "He's where?" 4 words, 2 syllables each. A question that captured disbelief, frustration, admiration, and resignation all at once. Because with Patton, the answer was always the same. Somewhere impossible. Doing something incredible. Moving faster than command allowed. Winning before permission could arrive. Bradley would later say that commanding Patton took 10 years off his life. But when the war ended and history took stock of how quickly Germany fell, even Bradley had to admit the truth. You cannot control a man who refuses to stop. You cannot coordinate with someone who moves faster than coordination allows. You cannot command a force of nature. You can only follow its wake and marvel at what it leaves behind. He's where? 1,000 headaches and a hell of a way to end a war.